Hi, everyone. Happy 2025. We are officially in the new year, though I'm recording this before the new year. I'm feeling the excitement of 2025. I know maybe some people don't have that outlook. I'm not sure, but I'm excited. I'm excited because this has been an interesting last year for me, and I've gone through a lot both personally and professionally, and made total career changes. And I'm in the throes of learning what it is to be an entrepreneur. And this business has really grown, and it's just so much more than that to me. It feels more like a community and the space that I had wanted to create initially when I just started writing. So I just want to start off by saying thank you guys so much. Thank you to those of you who listen to this podcast. Thank you so much to the people who follow along on social or read my emails or read my newsletter that comes out on Substack. It always means a lot to me. And I really, like I say this over and over, but it just bears repeating that it's never lost on me when somebody decides to spend their time with me. I understand how valuable time is and how it can feel really scarce at times, certainly as parents. And so when people decide that, hey, for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to listen to her podcast, or I'm going to watch a 5-minute video, or I'm going to attend one of her webinars, I can't even tell you, it really makes my heart swell. It makes me so happy, and it really encourages me and motivates me to keep showing up in this way. It's funny, but I'm not really an extroverted person. I would definitely consider myself slightly more, I wouldn't say I'm totally introverted either. I'm probably somewhere in the middle, but it's like the idea that I'm even on social media makes me laugh sometimes. Even when I talk with people who have known me for years and years and years, I've really been one to shy away from the spotlight. I very rarely have my picture taken. I am really happy to be behind the scenes. So the fact that this has all grown so beautifully and so organically, and I still sort of feel like I'm treading water and not entirely sure what I'm doing on social media, it does feel really affirming to see that people are that the work's resonating and that the messages that I'm sharing on those platforms is somehow getting to you guys in a way that feels helpful. And that really means a lot to me. So I do plan to sort of take that same idea and deepen the work in 2025. I'll still continue to do one-on-one coaching. It's changing slightly. So if you've done calls with me in the past, or if you've worked with me in the past, I've been originally doing a 2-month model, and based on feedback, I'm changing that now to what I'm calling more of like a 3-month intensive. So it's 12 weeks, 12 weekly calls. You have me sort of in your back corner, there to help you decide through every decision, walk you through it, give you scripts and plans, and we work out a lot so that we can put different frameworks in place so that you're not navigating that parenting ship in such a frenzied way. My goal is really to help in 2 ways. One, I think parenting is the sort of way that the thing we need, really the process we need to parent ourselves and to heal and transform ourselves. Simultaneously, it's also the same tools that we need to do the same for our kids, and how we show up for them and how we connect with them and how we foster that space for them to grow and thrive and be the greatest version of themselves. That was always my dream and my hope for my kids. My husband and I used to say that. We just hope they become the best versions of who they're supposed to be and who they need to be in this world, and they feel fulfilled and content and happy, and they can be of service in the sense that they're contributing and understanding that there's a sort of collective need to connect with others. So yeah, I mean, that was sort of the boxes we looked to check. So kindness was a big one, being grateful, being able to have our kids become resilient and be able to work through adversity. And there were times we set boundaries they didn't love, and we had to sort of sit with the discomfort that came up with that. But essentially that was, the aim. And I can tell you now, as adults, they're doing fantastic. They're doing really, really well, and I'm proud of them, and they'll keep learning, and so will I. So with that, one, I just wanted to update you on that. The one-on-one coaching, I do only have 2 spots available for January. So if you are interested, I'll put the link in the show notes. You can book a free discovery call so we can determine if coaching is the right next step for you. But again, that's 12 weeks really to a full transformation in terms of the parenting process that you've adopted, and how to really lean into some new practices that are going to just really help you get centered and clear and really attune and understand what your child needs, what you need. And as a result, you'll have the tools in place to achieve those things. And I think that's partly why most parents feel overwhelmed and can become sort of reactive. I think it's in part because we don't know what to do when things go awry. So the coaching piece of it is really intimate. It's really wonderful, and I love doing it. I'm also going to do group coaching again. That's more affordable. I love group coaching. I think there is some value in being able to see yourself in others' stories and in other people's experiences. It can feel really isolating if you happen to be in a parenting challenge right now. So I think if you are feeling that way, you will feel really, really just affirmed when you look around that space in terms of the Zoom room and you can see others who are really right there with you. And the advice I'm usually giving them is the advice that you need to hear and vice versa. So the group coaching will come out at the end of January, beginning of February. So I'm really excited to launch that. So stay tuned for more details. Again, I'll send those out through emails and things like that. And I am working on a membership. I am really excited about this. I won't say too much right now because I'm still working out the kinks, but I'm really picky about what I want it to look like. I don't want it to feel like a course. And the reason being is I have notoriously purchased multiple digital courses from probably some very brilliant people, if I'm being honest. And quite frankly, I just don't finish them, or I start. And the reason being is because I don't think we're really meant to learn alone. That's why I think Zoom school isn't really great for kids. And that's why I think some of these sort of isolated independent projects can, for some people, I'm sure it's perfect. But for me, like, it just doesn't do it. I need to be in a space where I see myself in others. I need to be able to talk to another human and not just watch a digital video and try to figure out like, okay, that all sounds really great, but then how do I apply it? So it'll be some type of hybrid where I will be there live with you guys. I will be there on calls. I will be sitting with other friends in the field who can provide you guys other areas of expertise. I will provide videos for you, and then I will also be there. So I'm figuring out the perfect kind of way to do that. And I think the software situation will be tricky, but I'm relentless. And when I have a vision, I will do everything I can to see it through. So unless it's exactly how I want it and exactly what I think you need, which is I think you need people and you need community and you need to be able to talk to me. That's what I think you want. And I want to be able to talk back to you. So I'm really looking to see how we can make it as interactive as possible. So stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let me jump into today's episode. It's another solo one. And we're going to talk about the 3 pillars, that as I call them, to connected parenting. And really the term connected parenting for me just means that we have the ability to sort of connect with ourselves and our kids. You know, we the parents can often leave ourselves out of the equation. And it's not doable, right? It's not feasible. And I'm hoping if you've been with me long enough, you're starting to realize that when we abandon our needs as the parent, when we really kind of constantly just, adopt that sort of martyr parent mindset of like, it just has to be all about everyone else and not me, it really doesn't yield the end result that you want. And it really doesn't always benefit your kids, even though in the moment it might feel like it. Now, certainly, does parenting come with several moments of sacrifice? Absolutely. And we do those and we do them gladly because it's just part of the job. But not when it's out of balance, not when we've convinced ourselves that unless we're running ragged, we're not doing a good job. This is like, I always joke, and I've told this story before, but there's like what I call the busyness trap, and I've written about this, but like I remember overhearing 2 moms at the park, and they started to describe, oh my gosh, I've been so busy. And the other one was like, no, I've been so busy too. I totally know. And the other one's like, well, you got to hear my day yesterday. And she just starts rattling off what her day sounded like or what her day was like the day before. And she's like, I mean, it's one thing after the other, an appointment, and then this activity, and then this camp, and then this course, and then this class for her kid, and then off to practice. And right. And the other one's going, oh my gosh, well, you should hear what happened to me. And then she's like the one upper, and she's like talking about how busy she is. And ultimately, I think it was all a very well-intended conversation. I think it's very honest and accurate, but at the same time, I think we sort of like pride ourselves on this idea of like doing and doing and doing, and to the point of like, at what point do we sort of burn out, and what does that look like for each one of us, and what does that really mean for our family and our kids and our partners and everything else. So I wrote this article and I wanted to do a podcast episode about it because I was going through, when I did a Substack newsletter about my top 5 newsletters that were the most read in 2024, this one was number 3, and it really touched my heart because in all honesty, it's one of the longest ones I've ever written. And so sometimes I always wonder, like, do people really want to read really lengthy newsletters anymore? And so when I saw it was up there, I felt very happy. So I thought I would do a podcast episode to go along with it so you guys can kind of hear me do a little bit of a deeper dive on the 3 pillars, what they are, and how I really weave them into my own life, into clients' lives, and things of that sort, and we can paint them with certain examples. So number 1, when we're talking about connected parenting, again, connecting to self, connecting to child, happier self, happier home. So the first pillar is a process to help reparent yourself. I actually don't even love the word reparent, so I'm going to change that. I wrote this a while ago, and let's call it interparent. How to interparent yourself. So if you've been with me for a minute, you know that I talk a lot about this idea of broadening the way we define parenting. We usually define parenting as this idea of parenting a child, raising a child, growing a child, which in all fairness, that is exactly what we're doing. However, I look at parenting and I look at it more broadly, and I think to myself, it's such a beautiful process, full of wisdom, full of intuition, full of transformation. And why don't we apply that same process to ourselves? Why don't we tend to nurture ourselves? Why don't we apply a parenting process to our lives, to moments of career changes or loss or transitions or whatever it is that we're going through? So parenting for me, when we can look at it through the lens of being this really transformative process, and then taking that process and then going, okay, well, how do I apply that to this or that or whatever event is happening that really needs me to sit with it for a second, I think can be so incredibly helpful. I've actually worked with clients on this one-on-one. I do one-time calls a lot of times because people are really just seeking clarity on where they can unblock themselves, because that is the tendency of what it feels like. But anyways, back to this idea of like the pillars of connected parenting, we need a way to interparent ourselves. And I teach the process PAR. So you guys probably have heard me talk about PAR a lot. It just stands for pause, acknowledge, respond, reflect. That's really for us to better understand what are our triggers? What are those things that get us activated that as a result then causes us to have big reactions towards our kids, right? So for me, I think that what might be really helpful to think about in this instance is like, I'll use myself as an example. And I talk about this on another podcast that I did, or just even in different videos. But when we need to pause, it's the hardest thing when you're very used to automatically reacting. So if we don't have a way to interparent ourselves and how to interparent those big reactions that are coming up, those to me are like the knock at the door that's telling you like, hey, look over here. You still got some stuff you've got to look at. You've still got some things you've got to resolve. There are some insecurities that are bubbling underneath that when you have those big reactions. Now, is it perfectly normal for parents to feel exhausted, and sometimes that's the reason we have these big blow-ups? Sure. But if we always lean on that as our answer, like, well, I'm just tired, or I'm just exhausted, or I'm doing too much, and we never make any changes, why? Right? What's underneath it? Where can we sit with that a little bit? Because there's always something we can do a little different. We can even if it's a mindset shift, there's always something we can tweak and change rather than just resigning to this idea that it has to feel this way. It has to be this way. So in order to do that, we really have to be able to interparent ourselves. So PAR is a great place to start, right? Because it teaches us how to pause. Teaches us how to acknowledge this activated state. Some of us are in such an activated state at all times, I don't even know that you're aware of it, right? And that's the parent who's walking around all day correcting everybody and telling everybody what to do and where to be and feeling exhausted and feeling like all you have to do is nag and do this. And maybe you're kind of brimming with anxiety all the time, and the second somebody says something, you have such an anxious response, or maybe you bite their head off without even meaning to. When we're in an activated state at all times, we never really recognize like what the exact needs are for ourselves and for those in front of us, because we're just on this doing mission. It's like one foot in front of the other. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And so really, I really encourage everybody to welcome this idea of really pausing, creating just a little bit of space. I'm not talking about like in the middle of a big tantrum going and meditating in another room. Like, we're certainly going to be realistic about this, but you can certainly just take a couple of deep breaths and gather yourself before you decide how you want to respond to the emotion or the struggle or the experience that your child might be having. So again, we can talk a little bit more about PAR on other podcasts, and I've talked about it throughout, but you really want to think about, how do you interparent yourself? I'll run through the 5 pillars really quickly, but this is going to be really critical, and I'm going to talk more about this in 2025. But number 1, we want to definitely master pausing, which I just talked about. Number 2, you want to practice stillness. This does not always mean sitting in silence. I want to be very, very clear about this. To me, the most beautiful moments when I can really find stillness is when I learn to quiet my thoughts and I'm fully present and just taking everything in around me. Mornings can be a beautiful time to just really sit still for a couple of minutes and just express gratitude for the day, for the moment, for the deep cleansing breath that you're about to take, for the warm cup of coffee you might be able to drink or maybe not, for a little bit of peace before the chaos might begin, right? Just really like anchoring in and just allowing those thoughts to quiet down, right? Have you ever just taken a couple of deep breaths and really felt what it feels like in your body to breathe, the rise of the chest, the rise of your belly, the exhale, right? The release of the body, the shoulders slumping down, the body sort of settling into a chair, whatever it might be, that's stillness for me. It's really those moments of presence where you can be so still that regardless of anything, you almost feel the tiniest amount of peace enter, right? So this is a practice we have to cultivate. The reason I didn't call it mastering stillness is because it is a practice, it is a process. I work on stillness every single day and it has completely changed my life, but it's something I work on consciously every day, being able to find those moments. Number 3 is being able to honor simplicity. There are a lot of clients that I work with and their homes are very busy and they can feel chaotic. We've got to simplify. Where can we take something away? Where can we do a little less? Where can we tell ourselves that those aren't have-tos? The things that you're doing are not really have-tos. You're just telling yourself that. What can we let go of? Expectations, right? How can we simplify the chatter? How do we simplify the mental load? And again, I'm giving you guys just such a brief overview of this, but there's a lot more that we would dig into, certainly like in a coaching session. Number 4 is honoring change. We really want to be able to be present when change comes at us or we choose change. How are we moving through it? Are we resistant? Are we reluctant? Do we not want change? Change is the one thing that I help all my clients with, because usually when you come to me, things are not going well in your home, right? Understandably so. That's why you reached out. And so now I'm going to ask you to change some things that you're doing. It can feel so uncomfortable. We're really sort of attached to the way we want to parent, the way we want our kids to be, the ideas, the values, the things that we have in mind. Those are beautiful. But how do we welcome this idea of like a new way or a different way or a different version of the thing that we thought was supposed to be? How do we parent the child who is exactly who they are in front of us versus the child we wish they would be in that moment, right? So that's really this idea of like, how do we honor change, embrace change? It's obviously bigger if we think of it like on a life scale, but from a parenting perspective, the more we do this, the more fluid and accepting and sort of the more we can dance with change, I'll say, the better our kids become at doing the same. Kids naturally resist change, right? So we've got to be the ones to really carve out the space where we can show them, like, how do you do this? How do you really take change and use it for all those beautiful things that it can provide us and all the insights it gives us? And then the last one is trusting your intuition. So how can we sit and really give ourselves a moment to like be still and listen to what's coming up? You know, I've talked to so many parents about this, but we are so intuitive when it comes to our kids, right? Like we know if they're crying a little bit differently or like something's happening, they're getting sick. We can discern right away. Our intuition is so connected to who they are and what they are and what they need. But there is a part of us that we lose the ability to attune to ourselves, to intuit what we need. So really, there's different practices that I teach, but we want to get in the space where we can really honor our intuition and trust it really immensely. So inner parenting is a huge, huge part of a pillar of connected parenting, because we have to be the steady one. We have to be the one who's really anchored and present, and we have to be able to sort of navigate that ship so that our kids can learn those self-regulation skills and regulate their emotions and do it in a healthy way where they're processing those things. Number 2, how do we create an environment that's conducive for connection? Okay, this is really important. So I use this example in the article and I'll kind of restate it here, but what I talked about in it was like I was working with a mom and she had a really big job in marketing, and she's very successful and wonderful at what she does and really committed to her job and really committed to also being a very present mom. And she was struggling to sort of figure out where and how to do this because her hours didn't really mirror like a 9 to 5. She had to sort of be available all the time, or at least she believed she had to be available all the time and that her phone needed to be out all the time. And it got to the point where every time she got a notification, a voicemail, a call, a text, she would be, you know, in the middle of playing with her kids and she immediately had to stop, and it was interrupting a lot of their time together. And so her children naturally started to become resentful of the phone and resentful of like anytime they saw her holding the phone before they even did anything, it would usually result in a negative behavior. They would do something she didn't want. She was overwhelmed because she was trying to do the things she needed to do for work. So then she would snap at them and tell them, well, I have to do this and this is part of my job. And she felt like she had to really explain why her phone was out and why she was tending to this call. Again, because they're children, they don't have that perspective to really even understand what she's talking about. But I get it, right? I get everybody's point of view on this situation. So then we talked about doing time blocks where there is just moments where that phone is completely away or not really accessible or available to her so that she can be completely present, and that she would think about outlining this with her clients so that they knew, like in terms of her availability, when and how she was the expectation was like she wasn't going to respond every second. So long story short, she says to me, I love it. This has been working really well. I think what I have to do is just lock my phone away. I think that's the best way to do it, is let me just lock my phone away. We're thinking again, going back to that idea of like a conducive environment for connection. How do we create this conducive environment? So it's fair. And I liked her idea of locking it away. But I pushed her even further. And I said, how meaningful would it be to your kids if your phone was out and every time it dinged or pinged or made a noise or did whatever, you didn't even turn your head or your focus and you were still locked in with whatever they were doing, whatever it was they were saying, whatever they were talking to you about, right? That's where we start to show our kids like we are actually the ones who are in control of our lives, of our time, of our priorities. And so she sat with it and she goes, okay, I'm going to do it. So the first couple times, just to build in this habit, we did put the phone completely away. Then she left it out. And certainly this came with challenges, right? But with time and with practice, she got really good at it. And it resulted in her kids no longer having adverse behaviors every time her phone came out. When she was on it, they understood that that was her time to respond to certain messages. In moments when they struggled, she knew how to validate and show empathy, but to continue to set the boundary that needed to be set, that she needed that time to do her work, and that was their time to do X, Y, or Z. So again, I'm, giving you the very simple version of this, but the idea is like, how can you create a conducive environment in your home so that you are building connection with your kids? So what would that look like? By the way, it does not have to be all day long playing with your kids, being present nonstop. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm a big believer in kids need to play alone. Kids need to play without parents sometimes. There has to be time in the day for just free play, exploration, being on their own. We are way too involved in terms of all of our kids' decision-making, plays, the play that they're engaged in, the peer interactions. We're just in it. We're too in it. We got to pull ourselves out of it so that our kids can develop the skills that they naturally will develop in play. So, but there are moments where we can create these meaningful connections. Maybe it's around the dinner table. Sometimes it can be on those drives to and from pickup and drop off in school and what have you. Sometimes that meaningful connection is maybe it's like the 30 minutes before bed when everybody's winding down and you're just cuddling together. It can show up in a lot of different ways, but we want to be very present and very intentional about how we are using those moments to really create this environment. And then the last one, and this one's really hard, but I think it's the most important. So again, remember, we're going to interparent ourselves. We need the tools to do that. We're going to create an environment that's conducive for connection. And then the third one is really honoring your ability and your child's ability to process complex emotions. This one is hard because most of you were likely parented in a home where when you expressed an emotion that was considered quote unquote negative or bad, crying, screaming, anger, sadness, whatever it might have been, you were likely reprimanded, told to stop it, told to stop acting like a baby, don't cry, or you weren't validated, so you're told there's nothing to cry about, don't be afraid, there's nothing there, you're being silly, don't act like a baby. And so as a result, growing up, what we started to do was we learned to either suppress those complex emotions and not allow ourselves to express them or experience them out of fear that we would be reprimanded, or we've learned to completely bypass them and avoid them altogether. So as a result now, fast forward to a modern parent who is trying to honor their child's emotions. When your child begins to express, let's say, a tantrum, right? They don't get their way, they start to cry. The discomfort in us is so activated because this is totally new terrain. How do you just sit with somebody who is out of control crying? That feels so foreign. It feels unnatural because what we always want to do what's familiar, right? There's that saying, I'll probably botch it, but like we'll always choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven because we just don't know how to do things differently. Hence one of the tenets of the parenting process, right? Honoring change, embracing change. We have to be willing to look at it a little differently. Now, what most parents want to do when their child is in a moment of a tantrum or emotional dysregulation is, even though we might not be getting upset and yelling, we still want it to stop. So we sort of panic and try to talk them out of it. You're okay. You're fine. Hey, what else do you want? Do you want to play with this? Do you want to do this instead? Okay, what if instead? And we're like negotiating now with them. The same dysregulation is being expressed right back to them when we do that, because we are still showing that, hey, when you are in this state, I am completely dysregulated myself. I can't anchor. I can't calm myself down. And so, again, this is a really nice part of coaching too. And like if you can do the group work or if through the membership, we need tools, we need ways to be able to deal with those complex emotions as they come up. One of the mantras that I share and have shared with clients is like, when you start to feel yourself immediately activate when your child is in the middle of a moment of dysregulation, I want you to just hand on your heart and just say to yourself, I am safe and so are they. For a long time, a lot of our upbringing told us that when we were feeling these feelings, we were not safe. We had nowhere to go with it. We had nowhere to take it. We had no one to tell. And so as a result, we just either learn to kind of metabolize it or just let it sit there. Maybe it kind of grew and became a bigger problem in other ways. We don't really know. Everyone's story is very different. But what I'm getting at is that we weren't made to feel safe. So then when our kids are doing this, it just elicits that inner child in us and we're right back there. We're right back there and we're feeling even less confident because now we're like, how do we even tend to this child who's in peril, in distress? And how do I help them when I can't even find my own footing right now? So we need the tools, we need the things to do this. Again, there's so many resources. I'll include them in the show notes, but I have free workshops on PAR. I have free workshops on self-regulation tools for you, the parent. There's a lot we can look at, but those are essentially the 3 connected pillars that you really, really, really want to think about when you're starting off your 2025, when you're looking at the new year and you're going, okay, here are 3 things I could really work out. What are some inner parenting reflections I could do? Could I work on some journaling prompts? Could I take a minute to just sit in stillness and start incorporating that into my day? When's the last time I chose change? Like maybe if that's just even going to a different class or a class instead of just, doing whatever it is that I'm doing at home when I have free time. Whatever the case is, you just want to be looking at how do you interparent yourself. Then you want to look at your environment. And then lastly, you want to be able to really sit and work through those tough emotions so that we can raise another generation of emotionally resilient, healthy, happy adults. And at the same time, we will grow ourselves to be that same way. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. I will be back with some really cool guests this year. I'm really excited. I have a couple of little mini series that I'm doing on specific themes. So I'm excited for that too. So stick with me. Happy you're here. Like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, it just warms my heart to know that you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to spend the next 20 some minutes listening to Albiona. So from my heart to yours, I thank you so much. And until next time.